First, this is the midterm review for Chapter 6 on the American Revolution. And if you guys recall, in class, we started off the discussion of Chapter 6 with the American Revolution based on discussing the advantages and disadvantages each side had going into the American Revolution. And so when we looked at the British, and we looked at the advantages that the British had, compared to the Americans. So Great British advantages include things like, a professional army, they had the wealth of an empire, and they had this large set of resources to pull from. They had a navy, they had fought wars before, they had an organized government, they had a lot of loyalists still in the colonies. Great Britain was the most powerful country in the world, and they had all those advantages going for them. The colonies, on the other hand, had the advantage of that home field advantage. And people say, "Oh, that's kind of overrated," but it really isn't. Especially when you have to consider that the British had to bring their entire military force over to North America. That took a lot of time and it took a lot of money. The other thing that the USA had on its side was it didn't have to win. They just had to not lose, meaning the U.S. just simply had to make the war last long enough that the British thought it would be too expensive to continue on anymore, and by doing so, that could earn them their independence or some sort of negotiated agreement with the British, which would increase their self-government. The United States did have some really skilled military leaders like George Washington on their side, and they had some great political minds, writing government documents and guiding this revolution. To remember, it was the wealthy people and the upper class really of the colonies that put this revolution together, not the lower average working man as in many other revolutions around the world. So the U.S. did have that as their advantage. The final advantage they had was that Great Britain had a lot of enemies, and that would be part of the strategy for the United States was get the British enemies to kind of help the colonies financially or militarily in order to weaken the British Empire, because Spain, France, the Prussian states, they all wanted to see Great Britain get weakened a bit. Okay, so, but when we look at this on paper, there really was no reason that the United States should have won the American Revolution. And when we boil it down to why the Americans ended up winning, it really has to do with one word, and that one word is France. The colonies were able to sign an alliance with the French thanks to Benjamin Franklin, and they sent a lot of financial aid to the colonies, about $2 million. They sent 10,000 soldiers. They sent a navy towards the end of the war, and it made a difference in the war. So without the help of France, the United States doesn't really win the American Revolution. And part of that is because the colonies during the American Revolution had a really, really, really hard time building an army. If you recall the article we read in Building an Army, the colonies really lacked money, and a lot of that had to do with the organization that they chose, the government that they chose, and the Articles of Confederation didn't really give Congress the authority to tax the colonies or the states and provide any money. They also had a hard time maintaining the average soldier. A lot of that had to do with the conditions that the soldiers heard about, word of mouth, but also had to do with the fact that the American Army was made up of largely volunteers, of militiamen, and they really weren't professional soldiers until well into the war, after Valley Forge, when Friedrich von Steuben finally trains the Continental Army in how to actually fight an actual battle. So it was tough for a lot of these volunteer soldiers to go up against this professional British army and win any battles. And we see that early in the war when the United States was losing most of the battles that they were fighting. So, the United States faced a lot of these challenges, and how they overcame them. Well, they overcame money was thanks to France. The Articles of Confederation and the poor governmental system, they didn't really overcome that until much later when they rewrote the Declaration of Independence. But the Articles of Confederation did allow them to really unite and win the war. And then the soldier thing that happens at Valley Forge, and with the help of France giving them extra soldiers. So through that additional help, the colonists were able to win. Okay, so let's take a look real quick at kind of the course of the war and kind of see how it plays out. So, and we'll draw our map of the United States here. This time it's in green. There's a poor picture of Florida. We'll go back to red here. So recall the British had a strategy, and that was to cut off New England from the rest of the colonies, and that's because this is where most of the patriots were, and where the strongest support, and where the revolution really begins. And early on, Great Britain was doing a great job of that. They had won the Battle of Boston, they had taken New York City, and they had won a key battle up here in Ticonderoga, and they were all about to cut off New England from the colonies when the colonists were able to win a key battle here at the Battle of Saratoga. And that prevented the British advance down to New York City and completely basically cutting off New England and these major cities from each other. However, in Pennsylvania, the British won in some key battles. They won the battle in Germantown. They actually ended up winning in Philadelphia. And by the end of 1776, it kind of looked like the British were going to win this war pretty easily, except that George Washington took a huge risk on Christmas Eve 1776, and he he attacked some Hessian soldiers the British hired at the Battle of Trenton, and actually won. And then a little bit later won kind of a surprising battle at Princeton. And those three battles, Saratoga, Princeton, and Trenton, kind of gave the Continental Army hope that maybe they could win this battle, and the victories at those three battles were instrumental in convincing the French that maybe they should help us. So after the war goes on here in the Northeast for a while, and then the British and the Americans kind of come to a stalemate after the Americans start winning a few battles. In 1778, the British decide that they're going to change their focus, and they're going to send General Lord Cornwallis down here to the south to start focusing on the South. And they thought this because there were a ton of loyalists down there. They thought that they wouldn't really find much resistance, and they thought that Cornwallis would pretty easily be able to win down here in the South and then make his way up north and connect with the other armies up here in the stalemate and pretty much crush Washington. And they'd be able to do all this before the French really committed any soldiers. And early on it was working. Cornwallis easily took Charlestown, and they took Savannah, and they took Camden, and they were winning some pretty easily down here in the South until the United States decided to change their strategy. And our old friend, the swamp fox, Francis Marion, decides that it would be better off in the South to use guerrilla war. And this is where the colonies really take to heart that idea of, we don't have to win, we just have to not lose. And so the colonists started to just use these quick brief attacks and ambushes to slow the British down and extend the war out. And it really worked. And they actually won a key battle here at the Battle of Cowpens, and then another one at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in North Carolina. And they really extended this war and made it last a whole bunch longer. And it lasted all the way until 1781, when Cornwallis eventually makes his way up to Virginia on the coast here. And he encamps himself there, which was a key mistake on his part strategically, because the Army of the South was able to surround him here, and then Washington was able to sneak down from the north. And then finally, our friends the French on with their navy, end up coming and surround him and blockade him here, and Cornwallis loses and eventually surrenders at the Battle of Yorktown. And the Battle of Yorktown wasn't the last battle of the American Revolution, but it was the battle that the British kind of looked at this and said, you know, we just lost an army. This war is going to keep going on. It's going to be expensive. We better start to think about how we're going to end this war and seek peace with the colonists. And eventually they did in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris. And thanks to the help of the French, the United States ends up winning all this territory and what we consider the east coast of the United States all the way up to Mississippi with the exception of Florida. And so, quick review of the American Revolution. Just remember what we focused on. We focused on the challenges that Americans faced, how they overcame them, looked at the advantages and disadvantages of each. Go back and take a look at that article, Building an Army, and all those key battles. You better know the Battle of Trenton. You better know the Battle of Saratoga. You better know the Battle of the Cowpens for the midterm.